and he goes into his jacket again. He goes, I'm going to effing stab you. As he comes really close to me, I give him one on the jaw. He falls on the ground. What can you do? You know, it was self-defense. Hi all, welcome back. I've had a few questions asking about the security work that I used to do. So I figured I would make a little piece about that. I did security for about 23 years before working in the defence sector, and that led to some pretty interesting situations. I started back in the bad old days before the SIA or any of those sort of accredited schemes came in. So I started off in clubs when I was about 17, and I just got into that from basically being in clubs when I was too young and breaking up fights that were going on, helping a couple of the doormen out that I kind of had become friendly with, and they just offered me a job on spec and paid me cash. So I actually started doing door work when I was 17 years old, and just did it for a bit of cash on the side really, and it continued on from there. And then from that I got into the security industry. You obviously couldn't do that these days, you know, you have to do SIA courses and all that kind of thing. And then from there started up my own little business and was self-employed, and used to have a couple of guys sometimes working with me doing some jobs. So one of the interesting nights I had, it's actually over a 2-week course, this one. So I used to work at a club that was on the end of a pier, and a lot of the seaside towns, you know, they seem picturesque, but actually a lot of the seaside towns can get pretty rough and ready because they're attractive to people from all over the country that come there at the weekends. You know, it's quite a transient population of tourists, and the kind of people that tend to go to seaside towns and go clubbing at the weekends are pretty gregarious people that like to have a few drinks. So you get your stag groups and hen groups and all that kind of stuff going on. And yeah, this place was pretty lively. It had not long opened, and I remember it was a pretty busy night. We had a team of about 10 guys working in there. I was roaming, I was running the door there. It was a dual partnership of running the door, because there was a door team that worked the outside and a door team that worked the inside. So there was 2 guys running it, one being me, and I would just roam and go and deal with situations as they occurred, kind of thing. So I got a call, there was a problem going on, a fight had been broken up by a door team, and one of the guys that was being thrown out, he had his lady with him, and she had become hysterical and angry. That often happens, and I basically was calming her down, and she had to leave as well because she didn't want to calm down, so I had to ask her to go, and she walked down quite happily. And now this club, it was right at the end of a pier, so you had a really long walk from the end of this pier, probably, I don't know, 300 meters, something like that, back to the seafront where the main entrance was. So the guys were all dealing with this situation. I walked this girl down and got rid of her politely. You know, I just said, look, wait out there, your boyfriend will be down soon. He might, you know, the police might be arriving for him or whatever. It depends what happens, because I think he had assaulted someone. So she started making a scene outside, kicking off, saying, you know, we were all out of order, we were thugs or whatever. And there was a random guy outside who cottoned on to what she was saying, came over. He tries to play like the white knight, like guys do. You know, he's visibly drunk. He's got a can of like super strength lager in his hand. He's got a cigarette on the go. And he's chatting her up and sort of say, oh, I'll look after you, you know, the doormen are terrible and all this kind of thing. So, of course, he approaches me because I'm just standing there making sure she's not going to come back in, and waiting for the other guys to come down with the boyfriend and the rest of the guys that were fighting. So she makes a scene, you know, says we've been mean to her and whatever. So this guy comes up to me, Irish guy, Irish accent, and he says, look, you know, I'm a IRA member and I'm gonna stab you. And I won't use the swear words, but you can imagine all these stories are like peppered with swearing. He's gonna effing stab me. If I start swearing on here, then I'm just gonna lose the channel. They'll start deleting all my videos, so I'm not gonna do that. So he's threatening to stab me, and he's going into his jacket like this, and he's motioning forward to me, and he's going, come on, let's go. And he starts looking like he's going to pull something out of his jacket. So I'm telling him to calm down. I got my hands up, mate, calm down. You know, there's no need. This is nothing to do with you. You don't even know this girl. You know, she's waiting for her boyfriend. Everything's fine. But he won't calm down. He's getting really irate. And he's saying, I'm going to effing stab you. I'm going to stab you. You don't know who you're messing with. So I'm just there telling him to calm down. Everything's cool. I actually light a cigarette myself and just sort of ignore him a little bit, because sometimes ignoring those sort of people, taking attention away from them, lets them sort of simmer down, because if you give them too much attention, that just feeds into the levels of sort of excitement and violence that they're prepared to go to. But he didn't calm down. He's really drunk. And at this point, he then really comes towards me, and he comes real close to me, and he goes into his jacket again. He goes, I'm going to effing stab you. As he comes really close to me, I give him one on the jaw. He falls on the ground. What can you do? You know, it was self-defense. I felt a bit bad about it, but there you go. You shouldn't go around threatening to stab people. Whether or not he had a knife, I do not know. I didn't search him because we were busy. I had way too much to do to start, you know, rolling people around and searching them. And also, that it may sound strange because I've just clumped him, but you start opening yourself up for more if you start searching people. You know, I'm not a police officer. I'm just acting in self-defense. Someone's threatened to kill me. I've got a pretty good reason to think that they might be serious. I can't take the risk that they're not. I've been in a few situations before. You know, I've seen people get stabbed. People have tried to stab me, so I'm not going to take that risk. I've knocked him out. I can't then start searching through his pockets, because then people could make allegations of theft. He could make an allegation of theft. You know, why am I doing that? And I've got two choices at that point. Basically, I could restrain him on the floor nicely. I'm not talking about kneeling on him and strangling him or anything like that. Just hold him nicely on the floor until the police arrive. I could ring the police and say, look, this guy's tried to attack me. I've had to defend myself. I've got him here for you. Or I can prop him up in the corner, leave him to it, keep a sort of eye from a distance, and then he'll get off and walk away. And back in the good old days, or the bad old days, however you want to say it, that used to be our kind of go-to thing, because the police didn't have time to keep coming out to incidents. It gave you a black mark against the establishment if you kept calling them out, and the police would sort of black mark you as well, despite the fact you couldn't really help these kind of situations from happening. I mean, what are you going to do? So I propped him up, walked back in. Unfortunately, I did, as I was finishing this cigarette, because I still had the cigarette on the go, I flicked the cigarette, and it was on CCTV, and the cigarette landed and hit him straight on the forehead while he was unconscious. So you see this sort of burst of embers off his forehead, which, you know, I didn't mean to do that. So that was just an accident, and I didn't really notice until I'd watched the CCTV back. But then we get on to the next part of the story. So nothing happened from that. These guys got thrown out the club. This guy had picked himself up and walked off. The girl had calmed down. Her boyfriend gets thrown out. Everything's fine. I go back into the club. Don't even think about it. Normal night, etc., etc. The following week, I'm at the same club, again on the end of the pier. This time, the weather is shockingly bad. It's like 30, 40 mile an hour winds. I was surprised the club could even open, to be honest, because obviously there's a high tide. The waves are like splashing up, you know, on the sides of this pier. So you would not have wanted to fall in there. There was guardrails around the club, but despite that, people used to monkey about on the edges and, you know, mess around. So kind of dangerous and super windy, blowing a gale, raining, just horrible. So we're all in the club, everything's fine. And then occasionally we would do a walk around the outside of the club, and especially on nights like that, you would do that because obviously if someone's messing about near the rail and stuff, you know, that's really, really dangerous on a night like that. So I'm walking around with another guy, and we hear this screaming in the sea. And we think, Jesus Christ, what's this? So we look over, and we can just about in the blackness make out a person in the sea bobbing up and down, and it was crazy like weather. The sea was ridiculous. Like, I don't even know if I'd have been able to keep myself afloat in there like this person was doing. So my mate runs straight back in the club and gives a couple more of the guys a shout. One of them comes out. There was this guy who was an absolute legend called Steve, and he was just like made out of granite, and it's like super fit dude, really up for it, and he just whipped his clothes off straight away. It's like 2 degrees C, and he just takes all his clothes off. He's standing there in his like old man pants, and he just jumps over the side. So it's like a 15-foot drop down into the water, which is like boiling, you know, really, really rough, manic tides, really dodgy, and he's just jumped straight in there. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, this guy's nuts, man. He's so brave, but there was no way that you would have caught me jumping in that sea, man. It was like, I would have died if I'd have gone in there. I'm not a strong enough swimmer. But we got an inflatable. There was various points around this pier where they had these big inflatable rings with rope on them. So we're throwing that out as he's jumped in. He swims out to this, what turned out to be a woman in the sea. And funny enough, she wasn't actually from the nightclub at all. She was nothing to do with it. What had happened, she had had some sort of mental episode about half-mile down on the beach, walked herself out into the sea, obviously contemplating suicide or something like that, and then got washed out to sea, and just the tide happened to wash her along, and she ended up next to us at this club. So my mate's now got hold of her. He's backpedaling with her in the sea and bringing her back towards this rubber ring we've got, and we've both got the rope on that, me and this other massive guy called Lee, a great big rugby player. And in the meantime, someone has phoned the police to say, look, there's, you know, someone drowning in the sea. So quite quickly, I would say within, you know, we're now holding this thing, and we're trying to drag my mate in his pants and this woman who's basically drowning, and he's just about able to like keep her up out the water. She can't even grip onto the ring properly because she's just so exhausted, and we're trying to drag him back in, but the tide is going the other way, so it's fighting against the rope big time, you know, and we're putting all our strength into it. We're just moving them tiny bit at a time back towards the beach. And like I said before, you got maybe 300 meters before, you know, you can even get to the beach, so it's quite a distance. So I see the police turn up on the beach. There's like 7 policemen down on the beach about 300 meters away, and we're desperately trying to drag this ring, and they don't come towards us. So I think, why are they not coming onto the pier? Why are they not doing anything? But I see one of them start taking his gear off. He jumps in the sea at the beach end and starts swimming out, and I think, wow, legend, you know, another guy who's super brave. He's jumped into this sea that most people in their right minds would not even want to paddle in. It was like super rough. So now we got this copper swimming out, and we're pulling in, and slowly we're literally doing like half a meter, you know, every couple of minutes. It was that rough. It was virtually impossible, and we wanted more guys to come out and help, but we didn't want a load of drunk people getting involved, obviously the club users. And there was a situation that had developed in the club. There was some sort of fight going on the dance floor, so that kind of meant all the other guys were tied up. So despite us calling on the radio saying come out when you can, there's a big fight going on, so they're not going to be coming out in a hurry either. So we're making slow progress. Gradually this policeman who's swimming gets to the rubber ring that we're dragging in, and we're still like a couple, you know, 250 meters away from the shore, and it's rough and it's deep. So anyone who comes off that, who can't support themselves, they're either going to be battered against the underneath rusty old metal legs on this pier, which was a strong possibility, or they're just going to slip down and drown, because, you know, it was certainly deep enough to do that. It was way deeper than you couldn't stand up in it, no way. It was probably I don't know, 10 to 15 meters worth of water beneath them. So this copper gets there, but by the time he swam there, because he's like, you know, struggling with the tide and the current and all that, he's exhausted. He's now in big trouble as well, because he's shouting, help, help. So he grabs on to the ring. So now we've got the woman on the ring being supported by this doorman Steve, the legend, in his pants, and this copper. And now our doorman Steve is like holding both of these two onto this ring because they're struggling. He's kicking like hell and holding these two guys on this ring, and we're pulling this thing, and we're pulling and pulling. Eventually, probably takes us about 15 minutes, we manage to pull them far enough down that they can, you know, get their feet onto the sand and they can start actually getting out of the water. So I walk down onto the beach and there's like 6 police stood there. So I'm really livid at this point, and I said, what the hell are you guys doing? You know, we were calling out for help. Why did you not come up and help us pull the rope? What are you doing? Why are you letting your colleague like that? And the colleague, he's like crawling out of the, you know, he's like coughing and spluttering and crawling across the sand. They're not even helping him. So this really sort of patronising lady police officer says to me, we haven't been water trained. And I'm like, are you serious? You think I've been water trained? So she says, we've got strict instructions. We can't do anything in water. We just wait for the Coast Guard that we've called. You know, they could be a while. And meanwhile, this guy's spluttering on the floor. My mate gets up, he's standing, he's helping this woman there. The police are just standing there like watching. And I'm super angry. And then she says to me, is your name? And then she says my full name. And I say, yeah, what's the problem? Oh, we've actually got a warrant for you because you hit a guy last week on the door, on the front. And so they're talking about this guy that I've sparked out because he's threatening to stab me. At that point, I was beyond angry. So I said to her, you know, you are a bunch of cowards. There's no way on earth as human beings, I don't care what your regulations are, as human beings, you don't stand there and watch like one of your colleagues drowning and then us two desperately trying to drag him in while our mate's helping. You've done nothing. And when we've actually like done the business and got these people into the shore, instead of like being concerned with the safety situation and getting, you know, maybe giving out some first aid or seeing if they're okay, your main concern is whether or not you should arrest me or not. I said, I'll tell you straight now, you won't be arresting me. If you try and arrest me, you're going to have the worst night of your life because it ain't going to happen. You won't be getting me anywhere. You need more police officers down there. So they then had a little conversation between themselves. They said, oh, fine, we're going to come back next week to talk to you about that. I said, no problem, I'll be here with my solicitor. I'll see you then. But that gives you an inkling into the sort of the relationship that we had with the police at the time. It was like a them and us situation, that the police hated door staff at the time because a lot of the door staff that had a connotation with the police that they were up to no good, they were doing some sort of nefarious activity. Also, there was a kind of jealousy from the police because they had to walk around dressed in this sort of slightly wally outfits, and us guys would all be in sharp suits and looking pretty cool. Most of the door staff would be leaving the clubs with, you know, pretty nice ladies, and girls would be chatting you up, and the police at the time weren't getting any of that sort of attention. So I think the male officers didn't particularly like that. Some of the female officers kind of had a chip on their shoulder because it was quite a male dominated job role at the time. There wasn't a huge amount of females like there is now. So they used to get kind of quickly aggressive with people, I think almost to sort of prove themselves a bit, but that wasn't particularly helpful. So the following week came, and it was actually a fancy dress night at the club, and I'd come dressed as Britney Spears, as you do. So I got like a mini skirt on, a little bra top, and I was like super hench at the time, this blonde wig, makeup. 2 police officers come in the club while I'm working. It's about 10 o'clock at night, and I'm dressed like Britney Spears. And I didn't actually have to do much door work that night. I was just doing a bit of supervision and stuff and walking around making sure everything was fine. And these 2 policemen come up to me and they said, oh, do you know this guy? And they showed me a picture off the CCTV of me from like a couple of weeks before when I'd hit this guy. And I said, no, I don't know that guy. thinking I was kind of pranking them a little bit, you know. I just said that as kind of a joke. So then they conspire with each other, and I could hear them saying, "It doesn't look like him. His hair looks different. Oh, well, this guy's wearing a sharp. No, it can't be the same guy." And I can't believe what I'm hearing, right? Because I'm obviously in fancy dress. I'm like the most ridiculous looking woman ever. There's no way on earth, you know, I've got a wig on, for God's sake. So the first thing you surely would do would be to ask me to take that off so you can kind of ascertain if it's the same guy in the picture or not. So he says, "All right, mate, fair enough. It's obviously not you." And they leave. And I was going to kind of say, yeah, it's me, you know, and but they had annoyed me the week before big time. And then I couldn't believe how ridiculously incompetent these guys were, that they weren't even like prepared to properly ID me. So they left. Well, they went round the rest of the door guys asking, "Who's this?" All the doorman, of course, said, "I don't know, mate, you know, nothing to do with me." So then they turned up again the following week. Now I'm wearing back to my normal clothes. I'm in like a sharp tweed suit, and the guy comes up to me. "We got a picture of you here." "Yeah, sure, you got a picture of me." "Right, we need you to come down to the station. We got a warrant for your arrest." So they take me down the station. I got my solicitor straight on call. This was quite a regular occurrence to me. If people like these stories, I'll tell a few others. There's some worse ones that aren't quite as comical. If people got a flavour for that, then I'll stick some of those out as well. But I'm waiting there. I make a pre-prepared statement. So if you're ever arrested and you haven't done anything wrong, it's always sensible to make a pre-prepared statement. Even if you have done something wrong, that's kind of sensible. But the reason you do that is because in an interview, if you sit there and say nothing and you just keep refusing to answer questions, that can be used against you later in court. Because then when you actually present your evidence in court later, the judge can take inference on that and say, "Well, why didn't they say that at the beginning?" You know, he can suggest to the jury, "This person never said any of this in interview at the beginning, so take what they say with a pinch of salt," in not so many words. But so it's important that you get your point across at the beginning, but it's very dangerous to allow that to happen in like cross-examination in an interview situation, because the police are trained to trip you up, and the police are trained to get you to say things by accident, things that you didn't mean to say, things that contradict other things that they've got written down. So the last thing you want to do is to be involved in a situation where, for example, they'll ask you something at the beginning of the interview and they may ask you something similar at the end, and if those two things don't match up, that's kind of a negative against you. Maybe he's lying, these things don't match. The problem is you're under massive stress at that point, so the likelihood is you might get some times mixed up, or you know, some descriptions mixed up or something like that. It doesn't mean that you've got like bad intent. It just means you're a human being and you stumbled over your words, or you got a bit confused. So making a pre-prepared statement with your solicitor, I put everything down in that, exactly what happened, list it all out, and then in the interview I give them that pre-prepared statement, and every single question they ask me I say no comment, refer to the statement. So I haven't not said anything because I've given them the statement, and now I've got a copy of that statement. So if they were to re-interview me on something, I just refer back to my pre-prepared statement, which I can have in front of me at the interview. So when they say, "What time did this happen?" I have a look at my statement. I say it's in the statement at 9 o'clock, whatever it was. So there's no way then that they can start getting me to kind of trip myself up, because everything's written down. Really sensible thing to do. And they show me a video. They say, "Look, you know, it doesn't matter what you've got in that. We've got evidence against you. It's very clear. Here's a video." And it shows me hitting this guy. But funnily enough, they only play like it's a bit like the internet, where people are selective about clips they play. So the police play this clip of just me stepping forward, hitting this guy. He falls down and they say, "Look, you've assaulted this guy," you know. So I said, "Okay, I guess you've got, you know, the lead up to that video. Let's watch 15 minutes before." And they looked a bit despondent. They didn't like the sound of that. And I said, "You know, that's the only way I'm prepared to discuss that further. You rewind it, let's watch 15 minutes before." So they take it back. So for 15 minutes, they see this Irish guy gritting his teeth. He's like going up to me, he's threatening to hit me. You can't, there's no audio on the video, but you can clearly see through his body language and the way he's behaving that he's making threats against me. Then you see him doing this into his jacket and like threatening and gritting his teeth and doing this. And then he comes very close to me and then I hit him and I'm like, right, what would you have done in that situation if that was you and that was a member of the public threatening you? For 15 minutes, all the while I've got my hands up and you can clearly see from my body language I'm telling the guy, calm down, calm down. And the policeman says, yeah, but when you hit him you took one step forward, so that means you intended to assault him. And I'm like, of course I took one step forward, because you don't hit someone off like a flat stance. If you're going to hit someone, you step so that you've got that fighting stance, so that you're balanced. He said, well, that looks like something a boxer would do. I said, well, I do box, so that is probably why I did that, because that's something a boxer would do, and I'm hitting someone, that's what boxers do. Well, we don't like the sound of that. I said, well, it's not about you liking the sound of it. This is about me having a right to self-defense. So anyway, they talk amongst themselves, these two police officers, then they release me. I don't hear anything for like 6 months. 6 months later, I get a letter through the post. We are informing you there will be no further action on the incident dated on XXX. So that's it. And there's no apology. There's no kind of sort of, oh, we made a mistake. We understand. We could see that you were in a situation. It was self-defense. And that stays not on your criminal record, but there's like an intelligence file on you that the police have. I know about this because of my job now. This has come up, and a load of other incidents where the police have presented me with this great big dossier and said, what's all these incidents? And I'm like, I can't believe they exist on a file, because I was literally not guilty for any of those. You've basically got a massive list of situations where someone was trying to do me in and I had to use self-defense, and that was part of the job. And it kind of irritates me these days when I hear police officers moaning about, oh, they're frightened, they don't get enough support, and the public have got a bad perception. Well, let me tell you something. When I was doing that job, sometimes I was doing security on my own. I had no pepper spray, I had no baton. I'm not allowed by law to carry any weapons that might have been able to help me legally. I didn't have any like mates close by that I could ring up. There was no rapid response team that was going to come out. It was just me. I used to get spat on, attacked, punched. People tried to stab me. A couple of people tried to shoot me, and I'm not complaining about it. I enjoyed the job. I knew what I was getting into, and that's the job that I did. I got pretty crummy pay. I got no pension whatsoever. That's the deal. So excuse me if I don't, cry a river for these guys now that have got a pension, that are carrying around all these weapons, that have really good support. They've got, response on a radio, and then they say, oh, the job's traumatic. Well, that's the job that you chose. If you didn't want to deal with traumatic situations, you shouldn't have, you shouldn't have become a police officer. Simple as that. Right. Sorry about the rant at the end. I hope that was interesting for you guys. If you like these kind of stories and you want me to tell some more, like I said, I've got loads and loads of stories. I've worked in strip clubs, I've worked in nightclubs, I've done close protection. I've got stories about it all. Some of the stories are pretty gritty. If you like that kind of thing, let me know. Some of them are pretty funny. I've got some amusing ones that are kind of weird as well, but they will probably be pretty good. And if you guys don't like these stories and you'd rather I didn't tell any more, let me know that as well, and I won't bother. Have a great weekend, guys. Take care.